Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
If you wake up out of a sound sleep with a broken elbow, are there paranormal implications? Could UFOs be living creatures? Can the occult be addictive?
Hello there, and welcome to the 343rd edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm Ben, and those far-ranging questions came from my co-host and partner in the paranormal, my dad. So tonight we have an open line show for all of you. That means we have no guest. So as far as our emails go, please know that any time is a good time to call in. That made no sense. But just call in if you want to talk, have a chat, all that good stuff. So call locally or from Canada. The number is 401-766-1240. Again, that's locally or anywhere in Canada. It's 401-766-1240. And it's 800-449-1240 from anywhere in the U.S. Again, that's 800-449-1240. But first, it's time again for our weekly paranormal contest. So last week's question was, what part of Australia has more reported UFO sightings than any other part of that country?
Well, Martin Short from London, we've heard from him before, got the right answer.
Like the actor.
I wonder if it is. I don't know. He's goofy enough to be interested in us. Anyway, the Northern Territory of Australia, where there is apparently no end of UFO action.
All right, so this week's question is, what is another term for the abominable snowman?
The adorable snowman.
Yes, the abdominal snowman.
Yeah, right. Only if you have appendicitis. You got to forgive me. We're rather silly. We had a long but very, very interesting weekend in Vermont. We were speaking in Montpelier. And
Vermont's a very interesting and sort of silly place at times. All right, so if you get that right, you will win a copy of Footsteps in the Attic, which is my dad's most popular book.
Well, I'll just repeat those phone numbers again. People say we should do that locally or from Canada or anywhere else for that matter. 401-766-1240, or in the USA from anywhere, 800-449-1240. Or you can write us, if you would like to answer the question, certainly you can call us, or you can answer during the week if no one gets it during the show by writing to us at paul@behindtheparanormal.com or ben@behindtheparanormal.com. Now to our emails. This is one of the more unusual ones we've seen lately. And again, we don't know any of these people generally, and some of the really interesting ones can be kind of far out, but hey, you never know. We give people the benefit of the doubt. We tend to have very intelligent listeners. Okay, this is from Miranda in Tacoma, Washington.
Okay.
The great KJAQ in Seattle.
Awesome sauce. All right, so Miranda writes to us. My name is Miranda, and I'm 29 years old. And on August 7th, 2011, I woke up at 2 a.m. to use the bathroom, and then I returned to my mattress and laid on my back and went back to sleep. Then I woke up at 3:15 a.m. to an extreme pain in my right elbow area. I started yelling from the pain, which woke up the house. My father came into the living room hallway and asked what is wrong, and I replied, my arm. He flickered on the light and said, look at your arm, and it was completely red and extremely swollen, and flipped the opposite way. My mom rushed me to the ER when I was informed my elbow was broken in 3 areas. I had dislocated it and had several torn tendons. Ow. I don't sleepwalk, and I was in the exact position I had laid back down in, and I sleep on a mattress that's on the floor. I was treated like I was losing my mind, and in return, after coming home from the hospital, I was hearing voices as well as objects moving. I need answers because this is still unsolved, and I am no closer now. Then I was having answers, whatever that means. There were also times my entire body where out of nowhere would become covered in goosebumps, as well as me hearing footsteps. Or my name being called, and when I go to ask what did you want, my parents looked at me and said, "What are you talking about?" So
okay, yeah, thank you, Ben. That's this is very interesting. Most of the things that she mentions are typical of, perhaps you might say, a parasite situation, but of course, waking up with broken bones is obviously a very rather unusual and violent occurrence. Now, of course, if this is all there is to it, and if this is accurate here, not to doubt you, Miranda, but I mean, as far as if we're interpreting your writing correctly, we have something here that does rather parallel some of the stuff we have seen in parasite cases. You know, I'm thinking of, Ben, is the case, the In the Dark case from the book Faces, Footsteps in the Attic, that in Burrillville, Rhode Island, where the man woke up and had bruises on his body from this.
Yeah, I've heard bruises and things like that, but that also parallels with what's it called, alien abductions.
Well, that's it. We often cite the case of 2003 when we were in West Virginia, and we were on the speaking roster with Bud Hopkins, the late Bud Hopkins, and he showed us of course, he was a great researcher in alien abductions, and he had a photo album, a really thick one, that had various injuries that were pictures of injuries that were supposedly rendered to people during abductions, and the first thing I could think of is this is just like some of the stuff you see in poltergeist activity.
But that's extremely violent. I don't remember ever hearing something that's like.
Well, the closest I came was in the Bridgeport case of 1974, the poltergeist outbreak. And I myself was injured. But I didn't. It wasn't in my sleep, and I certainly didn't miss it because it was a flying television set that hit me in the leg.
Exactly. And not while you were asleep. I mean, you'd think you'd know when that would happen. Which it's strange to me that. Well, there's one thing I'd like to know first is, was there anything going in the house prior to this event, or did it all start immediately after?
Yeah.
Also, what was the atmosphere at the time?
Sure.
I mean, how.
Okay, what do we got here? Now, from what we know, Miranda is 29 years old and apparently still living at home, which is very common today. And because the economy being what it is, you have several generations at times living in the same household. We do at our house.
Indeed.
And our house is big enough; we all have our space. There are only four of us, but your brother is 20. He's gonna be 29 this year. We love him. He's great. He helps us out with our work, and it's a great relationship, and it's a great family, great house. But I think sometimes in situations that are not as fortunate as ours, you might have a lot of stress and tension there.
Yeah.
Because years ago, centuries ago, people would live together. I think generations maybe in houses that were the same house or close by. But today, the economic situation is creating a lot of stress. So I noticed that you have a 29-year-old woman, I guess here certainly, with her parents who are skeptical about what happened. But such a violent event, I would say, is a matter of concern.
Yeah.
In the Bridgeport case, and this is the worst that I saw, there was a broken toe, because one of these television sets fell over and hit the woman who lived in the house right in the toe. And when I was arriving at the case site, she was coming back from the hospital with her toe all bandaged up. But a broken elbow broken in three places.
That seems like it would be more of an accident, like an unintended consequence. This seems like it was really intent to harm. I mean, broken in three places, and then.
Well, we don't know, but there's another possibility here. And we often talk about this because we say that whenever you have a case going on and you've got an entity there and say, something falls off a shelf, or there's some sort of issue with doors opening and closing, people assume it's, quote, the ghost opened the door or the ghost pushed the thing off the shelf. But that's not necessarily the case. We were speaking in Vermont. I used the analogy of us running down the hall or walking down a hallway, stirring up the air in the hallway, and some papers on a desk nearby falling off, not because we pushed them off, but because the conditions we created, or the conditions that existed in the hallway, such as air in the room,
Really quick.
Yeah.
The answer to the question, could you please write it down?
Oh, sure, okay.
So you didn't put it...
I'm sorry about that. We have a possible answer to our question. It's just the I'll write it down and show you here. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's quite simple. Oh, we have a winner.
Yes.
Oh, all right, great. Okay, well, the winner is, and the word, of course, the answer to our question is Yeti, a 4-letter word for abominable snowman. And Ben's going to get the information. Make sure you get the address and the phone number. Well,
you said Liz, correct? Liz.
And we'll get the book out to you. Congratulations. Okay, but again, to continue with this injury issue, we have another possibility here, especially in the dream state. I have more than suspicions, but some evidence from the dream state that we are in or in contact with many of our subconscious lives that, as you know, if you listen to the show regularly, from our theories, involve parallel worlds. This is from taking quantum physics to its logical or illogical conclusion, the multiple worlds theory. And this is the only, over the years, 40 years or so that I've been doing this, the best explanation for what I've been seeing in paranormal work is this multiple worlds theory of quantum physics. When you are in the dream state, you tend to be, I think at times, depending on who you are and what sort of abilities you have, are between many of these worlds or in the subconscious worlds where maybe you have had such an accident and it somehow collapses the wave function, as a physicist might say, or the worlds join and you wake up with a broken elbow.
I suppose that would make sense, but then why all the activity after that?
Oh no, well these are the conditions that I'm talking about. You know, like the unintended consequences and some of the conditions. In order for a parasitical entity or any entity that we call paranormal or we label as a ghost or anything can manifest, in our experience and opinion, what has to happen is that these parallel worlds, the boundaries have to become blurred. The Native Americans called these thin places where the boundaries were blurred. They blend, and you can see things from another world, so to speak, UFOs, ghosts, and all this stuff. And there are creatures such as these parasites who seem to be able to, as part of their life, and they're part of nature, go into other worlds, or at least reach in and feed on whatever happens to be there. In our case, this energy. And it sounds crazy, but that's what we've seen over all these decades. So it is possible that she had just enough contact with a world in which she really did have a broken elbow, and kind of pulled it back into this world, like those shamans pulling back those guys who had died here, who hadn't died elsewhere, and
yeah, true.
They turned up here, all that sort of thing. It's the same kind of pattern. So that's that might be, it might not be an entity that did it, or it might be not have been an accident she didn't realize she had. It could have been a parallel world experience.
There's a lot of
unpleasant kind.
There are a lot of explanations for this, but we don't have all the pieces of the puzzle to put it together.
No,
there are a lot of things. I mean, for one thing, there could be activity before this of a parasitical nature, so we can't outrightly say, oh, well, you did this to yourself in another world and brought it back over here.
No, that's not fair.
That is a possibility, but some of those are earmarks of parasite activity as well as earmarks of having other multiversal experiences in that household. So if all the ducks are lined up in a row, you can have either or of those explanations in there.
True.
Or someone could have just come in and just curb stomped her arm. There are a lot of ways to interpret this, but if we had a wee bit more information, we could definitely decipher one way or another which one it would fit best.
Yeah. Well, we are going to be contacting Miranda off the. And I keep saying that, and we do it, but we are swamped with requests for help, really, from all over the world, and it's really difficult to keep up with. But this sounds extraordinarily serious.
And that's why we need interns.
Right. Are we putting out that for? I don't know. That means training, and a lot of people aren't used to thinking the way we think.
Yeah, I know.
We don't need.
Give people some credit. Give people some credit.
Okay, all right. I will. All right. But in any case, here she's also Miranda's also referring to hearing voices when you get back from the hospital and objects moving. One of the things you look for in any sort of experience of paranormal phenomena in a house is not only who else is seeing these things, and are objects moving that you could not have moved yourself.
Yeah.
Because certainly people hearing voices and seeing things is often interpreted as schizophrenia, but we've talked about that umpteen times, that maybe people really are experiencing other worlds and it's being diagnosed as schizophrenia because we can't get beyond our narrowness to see it. And a name being called. That's a very common thing in parasitical experiences. Our case we were looking into in Vermont. While we were up there this weekend, we were speaking at the library in Montpelier, and we also were visiting with some people who have become friends over the years because of a case we've been investigating on their property. And they will hear voices of family members calling their names, and nobody's really doing that. In other cases, we've heard voices of family members calling certain people and insulting them, or saying things that were obscene or inappropriate, to stir up, in our opinion, anger and tension in the family, because that's what these things feed off of. So this is looks like a parasite case at first glance, but we don't make any judgments. We'll get in touch with Miranda and get some more information about that. Okay, and our winner, Liz Kula from North Smithfield, Rhode Island, the winner of our contest today, by guessing that the adorable snowman is really the Yeti, something like that. Okay.
Indeed.
All right.
Indeed.
Now here's one. This is on an entirely different subject. A very interesting question from Carrie, Kerri, in Auburn, Massachusetts.
Okay, so Carrie writes to us. Hi guys, I heard you often suggest that orbs could be plasma-based life forms living around the boundaries of parallel worlds. As Ted Phillips once said on your show, more and more UFO reports are of orbs. So could some UFOs be living creatures, maybe from parallel worlds, but creatures that live in the atmosphere?
Okay, very interesting question. As if you heard the show prior to ours, our good friend Joe Ferrier was speculating here and there. Could this be true? It's not a new idea, but it is an idea that has not been given much thought. Now, the first thing I thought of when I heard this was that we have been saying often lately that many of the connections between the paranormal events that don't seem to be related, ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, and all this business, they're often thought of as entirely separate fields. But nothing is really entirely separate from anything else, especially in this multiverse we're talking about. So I think perhaps that many of the conditions that exist can allow various kinds of phenomena to occur, or the context in which you see these things determines what you think it is. In other words, as we were saying recently, if you're sitting in your dining room and something floats by you and kind of waving, wispy, it's a ghost. But if you see the same thing with a silver disc hanging over it out in the field someplace, it's an alien.
Carrying a dish and all.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Saying where's the telephone or whatever. But that's the idea. So anyway, I think it is entirely possible, and has been speculated upon by exobiologists, or what are now referred to as astrobiologists, people who study the alien life or where it might be, and then if it's discovered, hopefully study what it is, that there could be planets in which the conditions are right for creatures to literally float in the atmosphere and feed upon what's there, because there is a lot of stuff in the upper atmosphere of a number of planets that we know of, and be literally look, I suppose, like UFOs. The orb thing, of course, is an issue that's quite interesting. Many of the ghost hunter type people will have orbs in their photographs and say, aha, they call them spirit orbs, and they just in photographs look like large blobs of light. Sometimes they almost look like cells. Cells, cells, in the biological sense, because they have
the nuclei and
almost
things like that.
Sometimes they have faces in them, or what looks like that.
It could be nuclei, because
I don't know, but again,
I don't know either. Yeah, that's just what.
Well, again, digital cameras interpret what they're seeing, but of course, very often they're dust particles on the lens or snowflakes or something like that. So you really don't know, but they do. I can verify that they do exist, because I have seen them with the naked eye, and I'm thinking of several places in particular where they will follow you around and seem to act in a semi-intelligent manner. They'll change colors.
Indeed.
And one thinks of ball lightning. I remember there's someone, a friend of Mom's, who had a ball lightning experience in her house. Turn around and there's this sort of sort of a sizzling, crackling, electrical kind of feeling, and there was this bit of ball lighting, and bang, it just exploded right in the middle of her dining room.
Well, there's also like if UFOs could be living things, or some of them. There are skyfish, like the skyfish.
That's very true. Yeah.
Although they keep trying to debunk what skyfish are. I mean, I remember I watched, I think it might have been Monster Quest or something like that back when that still existed. They were talking about skyfish, and they were like, "Oh, well, it's just moths flying really fast." Or
well,
you do like a stop motion. Yeah, you set
Yeah.
your camera to stop motion.
Yeah.
So then you just like pick up all this stuff, and they're like, "Oh, well, being like that couldn't actually exist because that doesn't make sense." It's like, well, I mean, sometimes a lot of things don't follow the laws of physics.
Well, that's true in the multiverse. I mean, one of the principles seems to be the various worlds have different laws of physics. But to explain what skyfish are, they're also known as rods, and they seem to be mostly, I guess, sort of whitish creatures with, how would you describe their flight, with almost fins that undulate. Okay, they don't really flap, and they do tend to fly through the atmosphere. And there were I can't remember the prehistoric, the term in paleontology, some sorts of insects that looked like that.
Yeah.
In perhaps the Precambrian.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can't remember what they're called either.
So, but none of these, there are photographs of these things that are several feet long, but I suppose they might, seeing things in the air, it's very difficult to judge size and distance. So I suppose they could be responsible for some of these things. So that might be a living creature that is interpreted as a UFO. But I think when you see even videotapes of these UFOs that look like orbs, I'm thinking of several of them taken over the mountains of Nevada.
What about you know that scene from Close Encounters of the Third Kind when the police are chasing the little like light UFO things? Didn't that actually happen?
Well, actually, it did. Yeah, Spielberg based everything in that movie on actual cases that had been reported, including 1964 encounter at Holloman Air Force Base, where supposedly something very similar to what occurred in the movie took place. Supposedly.
Yeah.
But no, there actually was a chase through Indiana and Ohio by police. Actually, as I heard, it was one object about the size of a house, but really strangely shaped and all weird lights and all that was flying above the road, and then eventually took off into the sky. Similarly, I suppose, to those scenes in the film.
Oh, okay.
But the point here, of course, is that you see objects doing strange things, circling rapidly and traveling at impossible speeds and making strange turns. And you think if this is some kind of alien craft, that whoever is inside it is going to be pancaked by all these speeds and all this stuff.
Yeah, all the G-forces and stuff.
And of course, certain multiversal principles might obviate that and make that not a problem. But what happens is, of course, that you can also think maybe these are living creatures who live in the atmosphere, maybe even of a world, and they sometimes pop into ours. As some people think Bigfoot just pop into our world, or the Loch Ness Monster, or whatever these weird cryptids or any of these strange things do from time to time, if you believe that theory. So that I think it's entirely possible these things could be living things. Ted Phillips, who was mentioned in this letter, is a man from Missouri. He's been on the show. He is a very soft-spoken, feet-on-the-ground kind of guy, who has documented, I believe at this point, almost 4,000 incidents of UFO landings that have left physical traces and some sort of physical evidence. I'm thinking, too, Ben, not to belabor this point, but this is an interesting subject, of objects that have left residue behind them. In the 40s and 50s and 60s even, there were reports of what people called angel hair. There would be a UFO sighting, and then on the ground later, near where it had landed or where it had hovered, there would be this very thin, semi-metallic stuff that would be analyzed, and then everything was hushed up. All right, so who knows? And, let's take a break. We'll get back to this in just a minute, but we're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. Stay with us.
ON Radio wants to send you to see the Beach Boys 50th Anniversary Tour, coming to Mohegan Sun Arena this Sunday.
Round, round, get around, I get around.
Tickets are on sale right now through Ticketmaster.com and any Ticketmaster outlet, but we want you to win them right here on the radio.
That's why God made the radio.
Listen this week to Mike and Joe in the morning for your chance to see the Beach Boys 50th Anniversary Show live. Brought to you by Mohegan Sun, your time to shine, and your station for summertime fun.
ON Radio.
Okay, and welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM and ONWorldwide.com. And we're talking in our show today. It's an open line show. We have many different subjects that people have written in about. And we're talking about the possibility of UFOs being living creatures. And as we said to our friend Joe Ferrier as he left today, you can't get the right answers if you ask the wrong questions. So we have to consider all sorts of other possibilities here.
Exactly.
The question also reminds me of the Maury Island incident. Okay?
I'd never heard of that.
Okay. It was around the time of the first incident that is popularly associated with the UFO era in America, and that was the Kenneth Arnold sightings of a bunch of UFOs flying near Mount Rainier. He himself being a private pilot in 1947, because 1947 also being the year of the Roswell crash, or the alleged Roswell
It's really
crash.
weird how that all started happening around then.
Yeah, well,
But there were UFO sightings before that, but they weren't really as prevalent after that.
Well, they seem to correspond with the development of the United States as a nuclear power, which is really interesting. We've gotten into that on the show, UFOs messing around with
and then before
nuclear
that, during
weapons.
World War II, when the Allies would fly over Germany, they'd see these things called Foo Fighters. They called them Foo Fighters.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, which are basically...
The Germans thought they were Allied and were terrified, and the Allies thought they were German and were terrified, and after the war, nobody could explain what they were.
Exactly.
But in any case, this Maury Island incident Maury Island is an island the peninsula in Puget Sound in Washington State, and this was logging country. So there was a fellow named, I think it's Harold, in my notes here, Harold Dahl, a D-A-H-L, like Roald Dahl, the children's writer we all grew up with. Or I didn't, but you did, Ben. And his job for a logging company was to go out in a boat and find loose logs that might have broken away from a bunch of logs that were being taken to the mill and collect them so they would be able to use them.
Yeah.
So that was occurring, and he had with him his son one day, some kind of deckhand from the company, and then his dog. And all of a sudden he reported seeing, I think it was 4 to 6 objects, I can't remember which, shaped like donuts. And they were coming in over the water, and then one of them was kind of over his vessel, and it began to kind of wobble and kind of sink. And the others came down and looked as they were, for lack of a better term, it looked as though they were trying to help it. And they were able, it was and they touched it as if giving it more energy, and it lifted up, and all this stuff started to come out of the center of this donut hole, so to speak. I mean, you couldn't make this up. And it started to fall into the water, and some of it hit the boat and killed the dog. And it seemed, they got samples of it, Mr. Dahl and all and it seemed to be some sort of slag, but it had very little iron in it. So, and there were no iron smelters or any place that slag would come from in this vicinity. And so what one wonders is, was this a living creature discharging something, or was it ill? I mean, who knows? It's really, you never know. We have a caller.
Paul?
Hi there, you're on WOON, and welcome aboard. What can we do for you?
Paul and Ben, this is Bob down the road in Cumberland, Rhode Island.
Okay, Bob, how you doing?
Good, thank you.
Good.
Do you guys know James Gilliland?
As a matter of fact, I believe we do in passing. I wouldn't call him a friend yet, but...
Boy, if you could get him as a guest on your show, what a great hour that would be.
Well, I'll make a note of that.
He is amazing. You were speaking earlier of a lot of orbs.
Yes.
He lives out in a place called Trout Lake in Washington State, right in view of Mount Adams, which is a sort of a mystical area. A lot of UFOs are seen up in that area. But on every night, you can go out there and you'll either see a fast-moving light going through the sky, and it would stop, and they would do yell power up or send a flashlight signal, and it would stop and get brighter. Every night they can do this. Plus, other people have seen orbs on the ground near where they're all sitting or standing. So there's a lot of mystical stuff going on. So get that guy on your show.
Oh, I know just where you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of those photographs of those interesting creatures we sometimes refer to have been taken.
You mean Bigfoot?
Well, no, the lion people and all these. They look. It looks like kind of like smoke, but you can see very clearly. And we had the photographer on the show with us, and we know him. But no, I know Gilliland, and I can get in touch with him, and I think that's a great suggestion, Bob.
Yeah, great. Okay, I look forward to hearing that show.
Okay, well, keep your eyes open, and we'll get him on.
All right, thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, very good. Yeah, that is an excellent suggestion for a future guest.
Definitely.
So again,
I don't think we've ever had an expert on that particular area of the paranormal on here.
Well.
Not that I recall, at least.
Well, it's amazing. Been on the show. We've been on the air for 5 years between Phoenix and here.
I can't.
There are subjects we still haven't covered. And I was worried when we started. We run out of things to talk about. That's never a problem.
Yeah, no, we've been on forever. And we still.
But another thing that happened with this Maury Island incident, living creatures or not, was it was one of the first recorded MIB incidents, so-called Men in Black, and this weird guy. And you know what happened with Dahl? He said that somebody came to him in this, black suit in a black car, very mysterious guy, took him to breakfast. You don't often hear that. Usually they just bother you and leave. But this guy was kind enough to take him to breakfast and said, you should really be quiet about this. And he asked him a lot of weird questions like, are you happy in your family life? Things of this kind. Or what's it like doing this or that? And, But at the end, he hinted that his family might be in danger if he talked about this, which obviously we're talking about it today. So I guess the guy must have. And the odd thing.
Well, how do we know that it's the exact account?
Well, we don't. I mean, you never know with these things.
Exactly.
But it is pretty certain that, ironic, Kenneth Arnold, who was a reporter, or at least sometimes worked as one, was one of the who was the person who saw that one of these probably was considered the first major UFO sighting in the U.S. at that time, was investigating this Maury Island case. So he was at least interested in the UFO subject. So it's very interesting. And there are all sorts of ins and outs to this, and who really knows? Okay, now here's an interesting one on a different subject from Mark in Norton, Massachusetts. A lot of local people writing in this week.
Oh, yeah, there's no problem with that.
No.
All right, so Mark writes to us. Hi, Paul and Ben. I love the show. And I heard you talk from time to time about the ghosts, or as you would say, the multiverse interactions where pets have died, but live on in a close world where we can see or hear them. You have talked about cats and dogs, but have you ever talked about, or have you ever heard of ghost goldfish?
Goldfish?
Yes.
Okay.
I have had goldfish since I was a kid, and there was one big one I had for a long time. And this fish would really make a splash when I came up to feed him, or when I came up and he would eat at feeding time. Sometimes I would hear the splash outside during the feeding times, and he would just come up to look around. Maybe I'm crazy, but this fish died about a month ago, and I still hear that splash. And the other fish are half as big and could never make that same sound. 2 days ago, I actually saw the splash, and there was no fish near it. The water just splashed, and the other fish were very quiet. Is my house being haunted by a fish?
That's not something you hear every day. But, why not? I mean, what is a haunting? In our experience, it's simply the normal state of the world, which is apparently the space-time is like Swiss cheese. There are plenty of worlds where this fish never died, or where your mother never died, or where your loved one never died, whatever. And these worlds impinge upon each other all the time. Even if you didn't see the fish, I mean, in some close reality, the fish is still there, and everybody else is still there. You hear people, when it comes to these pets, talking about, well, I still feel the cat brushing up against me, or I still hear the dog. You know how they, their tails will bang on the floor when they wag sometimes, and the people still hear that. Didn't you have a? Or I'm thinking of somebody else.
What are you talking about?
A friend of yours who had some kind of pet thing. No, maybe I'm not.
I don't. If you explained it more, I could.
No. I'm thinking it was someone else who wrote in. I'm sorry. Okay, I thought it was one of your friends.
It's okay.
But it is a common occurrence. Oh, yeah, Karen Anderson, of course.
Yes,
Karen Anderson.
Don't know how you got me mixed up with Karen Anderson.
No, you don't even look like her. But,
oh, thank you.
All right. Well, anyway, I think it's entirely possible that if in your terms, your house could be, quote, haunted by a fish. We've heard Karen has had experiences with reptiles and things of this kind that seem to have, I suppose, a multiverse activity going on, or were speaking from after they had passed away in this world, or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I think it's entirely possible, and that's really kind of interesting. I would get a little concerned if things started levitating off the floor, or you get hit by TV sets, as I did in Poltergeist cases. But unless that happens, I just say, hey, your fish. Just say hello to him next time you see him. So there we are. Okay.
Moving on from there. Onto something completely different.
All right. Here. This is kind of an interesting one. I suppose in a way, this might get back to the orb thing, but let's check this out. This is from Kathy in North Carolina.
Okay, so Kathy writes to us, "Hi guys, I not only love your show, I think you are way ahead of the curve on paranormal thinking. And I think you are really onto something with your ideas about how all the paranormal events are connected. And I think you are right about context. I live in Burke County, North Carolina, not from where they see the Brown Mountain lights. I mean, I've seen them myself. They look like orbs, flying saucers, ghosts, or just about anything, depending on how you look at them. What do you actually think they could be?"
Okay, well, this kind of matches up with what we just read about the possibility of living creatures. I have not seen those myself. We have been through that area, but we were doing other things. And they do look like some of these videos I was talking about taken in Nevada or many other places. The lights are going around in circles, and they don't seem like craft. But, of course, the context is that they're on this mountain where there was a battle between settlers and natives, and people say, aha, it's the ghost of the Indians, and all that. So, again, depending on where you see it, that's what you think it might be. A lot of people interpret it as the ghosts from the battle. Other people might say that it's, a more scientific mind might say, well, it's a seismic in origin, because some of these lights are seen before Earth. Now I'm talking about the Brown Mountain lights, but lights in earthquake-prone areas are often seen before earthquakes occur. However,
I wonder why that is.
Well, what do you do when you take a piece of flint? You make sparks, right?
Yeah.
You're banging it together. So it seems to occur on the geological level. However, just as with the sparks, when you're knocking two pieces of flint together, it's very quick. And many of these earthquake lights, as they're so-called, are really quick. They just flash. I've seen pictures of them. And they don't seem to be steady, and let alone moving at the fantastic speeds. And so, again, it's a question of who knows.
It's just some swamp gas.
Yeah, maybe. I suppose some of these things really could be swamp gas, but I don't know. But
I was attempting to make
I'm not aware that Brown Mountain is a very swampy area. But I think but again, I think the living creature thing. Then there's our theory that many orbs are living creatures that feed around these world boundaries, and that's why they're so present in areas where that are thin, as we said.
I suppose.
So there we have it.
It makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, it fits.
Well, because things can fit and not be true.
Yeah, exactly.
I do think back with 30, 40 years, 20 years ago, we would take a lot of photographs. I've always relied on photography, but only if I take it myself, because I know I haven't photoshopped it or anything.
Yeah.
And we didn't see a lot of these orbs. Okay, when you used old time cameras with old film, old Instamatic cameras, these old 35 millimeters, They weren't. They were not. Well, I'm not going to say they weren't there at all, but they weren't very common. Not like they are today. There would be balls of bright light, or sort of globs of bright light,
But not like individual lights
not
all over
not
the
like
place.
today. Yeah. So I'm wondering if it doesn't have something to do with digital photography. On the other hand, I've seen plenty taken with non-digital standard cameras.
Yeah,
So it is something of a mystery.
It is indeed. And,
Or the living thing. I don't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Poor Ben.
I lose my train of thought, and now I had something valuable to input, and I just don't remember.
I'm sorry. Well, perhaps I can refresh your memory. I get excited about these things. But there's the issue of because I've lost my train of thought too.
Yeah, see, there you go.
Yeah. Anyway, but the orbs and the possibility that they're living things and they're acting intelligently, and of course the plasma nature of these things. Even the great Carl Sagan, novelist and scientist who popularized much of this, was a man who thought there might be plasma-based life forms somewhere in the universe, and these could be them. So in any case, we'll continue researching that, and the photography thing is interesting, but not definitive, so who knows.
Well, we'll be working on that for the next while, so to speak.
Okay. I think we might have time. We
have time.
A rather long one here.
Let's not do a long one.
Well, this isn't that long.
Yeah.
That's a short one. All right.
It's only about as long as War and Peace.
And that's from...
Michael.
Where's he?
From Petaluma, California.
Oh, Petaluma, California. I've done a book signing there.
Oh, yes, indeed. So, hello, Paul and Ben. I am a screenwriter out of Northern California, and I've been fascinated with the paranormal all my life, though I didn't have an actual experience with it, that is until 2001. I had been living in Hollywood, and in January of that year, a good friend of mine decided to leave that crazy place and move up north to a sleepy little town in Sonoma County called Occidental? I think that's pronounced...
Occidental?
Occidental.
Oh.
I thought...
That's the opposite of Oriental. Occidental means things of the West, as opposed to things of the East.
Later, I found out that my favorite minds in the world, Terrence McKenna, also spent time there. It was there, while living in a house in the woods next to an old cemetery called Druids Cemetery, that I would have experiences that would change my life forever. When I tried to describe the events that took place there to others, later I would receive only crazy looks and disbelief. Well, you came to the right place then. And if I hadn't gone through it personally, I might have done the same. Anyway, long story short, I recently came across your name and your son's while doing some online research for a screenplay, and as I read through your theories, it started to resonate deeply with what happened to my friend and I out there. The energies we were channeling, seeing, feeling did not feel or seem like ghosts. I never believed we were living in a haunted house. It never fit into that mold. It felt as if the location of the house at the time and what we were doing there, we were recording a music album, thinned the veil between dimensions and allowed us to peek at something extraordinary. As I read through your webpage, I was shocked and delighted to hear what you described in detail, many of those entities, little people, the giants, and darker forces. I saw all those things with my own eyes. I'm running a pretty long message here. We've had longer, so I'll sum it up. I just wanted to thank you for your insight, and I very much look forward to absorbing more of your experiences and thoughts through these podcasts. I ordered your books from Amazon and blew through them in a couple of days, and I would love to talk to you and your son further about details of my experiences if you would like, and keep up the great work.
Oh, okay, well, very...
Wasn't really a question, but...
No. Well, thank you, Michael. I think we can find some time to get in touch with Michael, and I'd like to hear about those experiences in more detail. We find that people who are multiverse aware, as we call it, like our friend Todd Banks, who's been on the show, are very at home with a lot of these phenomena because they realize this is the normal state of the universe. They realize that we perhaps live in kind of artificial environments that we create, that we sort of create a world that's not real. And what is real are experiencing our full selves in all these worlds, and the wisdom that may come from that, or the knowledge or the joy, or sometimes things that are not so joyous come from these things. And that's not a very complicated thing.
You know what I think is interesting is that he was recording a music album with his friend at that time. So I guess, well, music's a very important part of the human society, but maybe it's more important than we think it is.
You may be right.
I mean, I remember once I had a teacher in high school who made a point that at the center of every atom, molecule, there's a vibration. So vibrations make up music, correct? Mm-hmm. So then music created the universe. Perhaps.
Well, you're not the only one to put it that way. There's many of the ancient Greeks believed that, and there were a lot of very ancient civilizations. When I was researching the book Turning Home for writing the book Turning Home, I researched a lot of the very, very ancient cultures that are what few are still left, such as the Australian Aborigines or the Andaman or Nicobar Islanders of the Indian Ocean, or the San and Khoisan Bushmen of Africa. Mm-hmm. They have a concept of that. It's a little vague sometimes, but there is a certain idea that there is music that is kind of at the center of the universe, and that certain tones or words had to do with the creation, and certain species operate on. It's really quite fascinating. I can't say that I understand it. I studied music for years too, but you are really. Your heart is really into music, and so any insight you had to say on that, I would take very seriously.
Well, no, it's just very interesting that it can do that music can do such things. I mean, there are forms of music that can change one's perception of things rather than having to use artificial means to break down one's own senses, so to speak.
That's very true, and you see that reflected in. There's bad and there's good. The bad is certainly reflected by the spectacles put on by the Nazis before and during World War II, and they would have enormous rallies, and they would have, and it wasn't just music; it was sight as well. They would have huge searchlights all around the thing, as if there was a hall of light they would create, and then of course the music. Get people marching, and it did amazing things to the psyche that weren't good. Yeah. On the other hand, in churches, I think particularly from the Eastern Orthodox tradition.
Oh, yeah, music is really important.
Oh, yeah, and the whole senses. You worship with all the senses. There's always incense, and the church, the temple, or temple as they call, is set up like the kingdom of God in the book of Revelation, and you have all these sensory input, and especially the music. It's really, I think at times maybe with them it becomes a little too much, but generally, but you're right. They might be very, very important to us.
Well, look at some different cultures and societies, like the Aborigines, Bushmen. Mm-hmm. Music's very, very important to them.
Yeah.
It's very important in their ceremonies, or even some mystical traditions of other religions, like the Sufis. They have some very interesting music that it's really powerful for them.
Yeah. That's an interesting Muslim tradition, the Sufis. They sort of stand apart, because they're considered heretical by most mainstream. Well, the Shiites and the Sunnis consider each other heretical, and they all consider the poor Sufis heretical. So, but in any case, their tradition and their music and their philosophy, very, very profound and very interesting.
Indeed.
Yeah, and it's just so again, music. Perhaps I don't know.
One more thing. There's also the Tibetan Buddhist tradition of the tambura, which has one note. It plays only one note.
Is that the singing bowl?
No. Tambura is completely different instrument. Okay. It plays one note, one singular note. That's it. But that note supposed to bring everything into harmony. From what I remember, I had a talk with. I had an email correspondence with Murray Silver talking about this once.
Oh, okay.
And he was saying that the tambura is like the almost perfect instrument because it only plays one note, and that note is perfect.
Interesting.
Which is it's weird. It's really weird to put because it's very hard to comprehend because it only plays one note. It's like, well, it plays one note. That sounds kind of boring, right?
Yeah.
But it works.
Yeah, we're up to something very important here. Perhaps we should pursue this line of research.
Indeed.
Okay.
Indeed.
Oh, very good. And also, well, now I'm thinking of the didgeridoo.
Right, now we have another idea for a show.
All right, well, yeah, we do. That's the second or third one this show. The didgeridoo, which is it sounds funny, but it's actually a native Australian instrument. Very deep, almost like a recorder, a very deep woodwind instrument.
Oh no, a recorder's really high pitched. This is like
well, they're
really
a tenor recorder. Well, no, I know, but it's the same.
True.
Quality of sound, a very woody sound, but very deep. And many of their songs, and I heard a few when I was there, just a few notes, and very often a drone of the same note too. So, and it does very interesting things to the psyche and the spiritual state of one who's listening to it.
Indeed. But there's other forms of music too that are actually extremely new. I shouldn't say relatively because it was only created not too long ago, like maybe 60s, 70s when it started becoming more prevalent, and it's very angry form of music called noisecore. And what it is basically feedback from different effects pedals or whatever, or an amp in this case, so it feeds back over itself and it's looped through a mixer, and then using the different effects knobs on it, it's modulated to create different droning sounds. But it's really very unnerving to listen to. I think that's the greatest adjective I can use to describe it. It's extremely unnerving because I had a friend who was in this whole music scene of that, and very not good in the happiness department, so to speak. He's a very, very angry person, and he was like well known in his small subgenre circle. That it was scary stuff. It was scary to listen to. Like I had trouble listening to it, and I appreciate all forms of music, but this was just scary.
So it touches something in people.
Yeah.
All right. Do people react the same way?
No.
Okay, interesting.
It depends on who you are, I suppose, because I had another friend with me who was like, wow, that's kind of cool, and then I was sitting there, I was like, that scares the heck out of me. Like, it sounded like war and death, like, just pure sound, which was scary. I found it unnerving.
Very interesting.
I was just like, I can't listen to this anymore, man. I don't know how you do this.
Yeah. Well, because now we're getting stream of consciousness, we're almost out of time, but you're thinking of bells. And their effect on parasites. Well, very often we'll go through a house, and I always have a child, if they're frightened, especially, ring the little wind chimes things. And that's why there's an ancient belief that bells will frighten away demons. And that's why churches have bells. Right. And I think what I've seen of the reaction of parasites to bells, that might be where that came from.
I wonder why that is.
I don't know. That's this is an interesting line of research. Sound in the paranormal.
Indeed.
Something we have to do. Well, we're out of time just about here.
We will have to.
Yeah, okay. Very quickly, I want to thank the people of Northern Vermont.
You can take your time because 2 minutes is a long time.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, we want to thank the people of Northern Vermont, certainly from the bottom of our hearts. We had a wonderful weekend up there. We spoke at the Kellogg Hubbard Library in Montpelier on Saturday. Had a wonderful crowd, and we went an hour over our 2 hours that we were planning because of discussion and questions from folks. And certainly our good friend Joe Citro, who has been on the show several times, was with us. Vermont's Bard of the Bizarre, as you know, marvelous author of a number of marvelous books. And so we had a great time. And we also looked into a little bit more to another case we've been working on up there. So well, thank you for that. It was a great weekend in Vermont. And we'll be in Connecticut in July 19th in Torrington. And we'll be there for their Main Street Festival. So I will give you more information on that.
So we have nearly 400 podcasts of all our shows, and they're available at www.behindtheparanormal.com.
And many thanks to our producer, once again, Ben, tonight, running the board. Did an excellent job. We'll see you next Monday, May 14th, here on ON 1240 AM and ONWorldwide.com, when Ben and I will welcome back British author Gary Osborne for another discussion of the nature of our reality. Specifically, is our world what amounts to a computer simulation?
The Matrix over here. So on our regular CBS edition, on Sunday, May 13th, in Boston, Pittsburgh, Detroit, and Seattle, we'll visit the author and philosopher Terence Aim to talk about the mysteries of the multiverse.
Very interesting book. And we'll leave you this evening with a quote from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who we are told listens to this show or has. If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion.
Thanks for sailing with us on our great cosmic journey, and we'll see you next time.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.